The first time it happened, I was more confused than angry. The silver Honda was parked with a casual arrogance, its back tires just kissing the edge of my property line. It was a tight squeeze getting my own car into the garage, the unfamiliar vehicle throwing off my usual parking rhythm. I peered through the rain-spattered windshield, half expecting to see a lost delivery driver or a visitor for one of the neighbors. But the street was quiet. I wrote it off as a simple error, a momentary lapse in judgment. The polite note I left under the wiper blade felt sufficient, even neighborly. "Hi, please don't park here." "Thanks." The cheerful smiley face I added felt like an appropriate touch. The following day, the space was empty, and a small sense of victory bloomed. See? A simple misunderstanding. All it took was clear communication. But that Thursday evening, the victory felt hollow. The car wasn't just near the edge. It was fully entrenched, positioned squarely in the middle of the driveway's entrance, blatantly blocking access to my garbage bins. My earlier confusion solidified into a hard knot of irritation. As I wrestled the bins onto the nature strip, I saw her. A woman with a sharp, blonde bob clicked down the path of a house 3 doors down, barely glancing in my direction as she collected a parcel from her porch. She slid into the driver's seat with an air of routine, the engine purring to life before she pulled away without a hint of hesitation or apology. That's when I knew. This wasn't an accident. It was a calculated convenience, and my driveway had become her personal parking spot. The knot of irritation from the day before had tightened into a firm resolve. This required direct confrontation. I rehearsed my words as I walked down the street, aiming for a tone that was firm yet neighborly. Her house was impeccably maintained, with a perfectly manicured lawn that seemed to mock my own slightly wild garden. I could hear the faint sound of a one-sided conversation from behind the door before I even knocked. She opened it with a swift, impatient motion, a phone pressed to her ear. "Yes?" she snapped, her eyes scanning me from head to toe in a single, dismissive glance. "Hi, I'm your neighbor, from number 24. I began, my voice deliberately calm. "You've been parking in my driveway." She didn't even pause her phone conversation. "Emicham, tell them I need the figures by 5, no excuses," she said into the receiver before directing her attention back to me. "Oh, for heaven's sake, it's just for a minute. I'm always in a rush." She offered a thin, exasperated smile, as if I were a slow child delaying her. "It's not for a minute," I countered, my politeness straining. "It was there all night yesterday. It's private property, and it's becoming a real problem for me." Her expression shifted from impatience to pure incredulity. "You're making a fuss over a tiny bit of concrete?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. The person on the other end of the phone was clearly still talking, but she was fully engaged in this new, more annoying interruption. "Don't you have anything better to do?" The door began to swing shut, a final, definitive act. I caught a last fragment of her conversation. "No, just a neighbor with too much time on their hands." The click of the latch was like a period at the end of a sentence I hadn't finished. I was left standing on her pristine welcome mat, feeling both enraged and utterly powerless. The week dragged on, each day a fresh test of my patience. The silver sedan became a permanent, gleaming fixture in my driveway, a daily reminder of my own powerlessness. I started altering my routine, leaving for work earlier to avoid the morning sight of it, taking the long way home in the evening just in case she was still there. My home, my sanctuary, now had a gatecrasher I couldn't evict, and the stress was a constant, low hum in the back of my mind. Then came Friday. The sky had been threatening rain all afternoon, and it finally broke just as I turned onto my street. My sister's car was already there, waiting for me. I could see my 2 young nephews waving frantically from the back seat. My plan had been to pull straight into the driveway so they could make a dry dash into the house. But there it was, Karen's car, parked squarely in the center, claiming the space as if she owned it. I had to drive 2 blocks away, my hands gripping the wheel too tight. The rain was a torrent now, and we were all soaked by the time we stumbled to my front door, carrying bags and a wailing toddler. As I fumbled with the keys, shivering and exasperated, I glanced down the street. Through the rain-streaked window of her living room, I saw Karen. She was holding a glass of red wine, laughing at something on her television, warm and perfectly dry. She glanced out the window, her eyes meeting mine for a split second. There was no recognition, no guilt, just a blank stare before she turned back to her show. In that moment, something inside me snapped. This was beyond annoyance. It was a profound disrespect that seeped into the very foundation of my home. The cold fury that settled in my chest was different from my earlier anger. It was calm, clear, and decisive. Politeness was a language she didn't understand. It was time to speak in a dialect she couldn't ignore. The decision was a cold, hard certainty in my mind. I spent that entire Saturday in a state of focused obsession, my laptop glowing in the dim light of the living room long into the night. I researched everything. Simple, private property signs were useless. She'd already proven she could read and ignore them. Spikes or retractable bollards felt too aggressive, too much like a trap. I wanted a solution that was unambiguous, legal, and utterly immovable. That's when I found it, the automatic, remote-controlled boom gate. It wasn't just a barrier. It was a statement. It spoke of order, of systems, of rules that could not be argued with. I pored over specifications, comparing motor strengths, arm lengths, and warranty periods. I read reviews from other homeowners who had faced similar battles, each testimonial feeling like a message from a kindred spirit. This was more than a purchase. It was an investment in my peace of mind. On Monday, I called a contractor. The consultation was brisk and professional. I showed him the spot, right at the property line. We discussed concrete foundations, power sources from the garage, and the best model for a residential setting. The quote was substantial, a number that would have given me pause for any other home improvement. This time, I didn't hesitate. "Do it," I said. The sound of the digger breaking ground 2 days later was the most beautiful noise I'd heard in weeks. I watched as the post was set, the sleek black arm was bolted into place, and the electrician connected the wires. It stood there, a silent, mechanical sentinel. I held the 2 remote controls in my hand, their weight feeling like justice. The first 2 days were a quiet, deeply satisfying symphony of mechanical whirs and frustrated car engines. I'd watch from my window as Karen's silver sedan would approach, slow, and then stop. I could almost see the gears turning in her head through the windshield. She'd stare at the black arm blocking her path, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning comprehension, and finally to tight-lipped fury. She'd then rev the engine slightly before speeding off to hunt for a spot on the crowded street. The passive victory was sweet, but I knew it was only the prelude. The confrontation came on a bright, sunny morning. I was deliberately tending to a flower bed near the fence, a casual sentry waiting for the inevitable. She didn't disappoint. She marched across the lawns, her footsteps sharp on the pavement. "You," she spat, dispensing with any greeting. "What is the meaning of that contraption?" I wiped my hands on my gardening trousers, taking my time. "It's a boom gate, Karen. It keeps unauthorized vehicles off my property." I kept my voice level, factual. "It's a monstrosity. It's an eyesore for the whole street. You can't just erect something like that without permission." Her voice was rising, tinged with a hysterical edge. "I checked the local ordinances. I can actually. It's my property." She spluttered, her face flushing. "Where am I supposed to park? This is incredibly hostile." For the first time, I didn't try to justify or explain. I simply looked at her, my expression neutral. "That," I said, turning back to my petunias, "sounds like a you problem." The silence that followed was thick with her rage. I could feel her standing there, vibrating with indignation, before she let out a sound of pure frustration and stormed away. The gate had won its first battle. Karen's war of attrition began with petty, almost childish, maneuvers. Her first new tactic was to park on the street with surgical precision, positioning her car so the very tip of her bumper overhung my driveway, just enough to physically block the boom gate's arc of descent. The first time I saw it, I felt a fresh spike of anger at her audacity. But this time I had tools. I didn't engage. I simply took out my phone, snapped several clear photos showing the license plate and the obstruction, and called the non-emergency line for parking enforcement. An officer arrived within the hour, measured the overhang, and left a bright yellow ticket tucked under her wiper blade. She never tried that again. The anonymous notes came next, slipped under my door on crisp, expensive paper. They were typed and devoid of a signature, complaining that the gate was bringing down the character of the neighborhood and was a blight on our community. I recognized the font and paper stock immediately from the flyers for her essential oils business that occasionally appeared in mailboxes. The irony of her complaining about blight while trespassing was lost on her. I collected each note in a folder, a quiet archive of her frustration. The boom gate, meanwhile, remained an impassive, perfect defender. It lowered and rose with a quiet hum, a robotic knight that never slept, never got angry, and never, ever failed. Each of her attempts was met with a calm, systematic, and ultimately victorious response. She was fighting a battle against an opponent who felt no emotion, and she was losing badly. The silence that settled over the following weeks was profound. The war was over, and the absence of conflict was itself a victory. No more revving engines, no more slamming doors, no more notes slithering under the mat. The only sound was the reliable, satisfying hum of the boom gate as it performed its solitary duty. I reclaimed the simple pleasure of coming home, pressing the remote, and watching my property open up to welcome me, and only me. I'd see Karen occasionally, trudging from a parking spot far down the street, her shoulders slumped under the weight of grocery bags. There was no more defiant glare, only a weary acceptance of a new reality she had been forced to acknowledge. The final, unspoken surrender happened one evening as I was leaving. I pressed the button on my remote and watched the black arm ascend. As I opened my car door, I felt a presence and looked up. Karen was standing on her porch, not doing anything, just watching. Our eyes met across the distance. This time, there was no fury, no contempt. Her gaze was flat, tired, and in its depths, a flicker of something that might have been grudging respect for the sheer finality of the solution. She gave a single, slow, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't friendly. It was a treaty. I nodded back, a minute dip of my chin. Then I got in my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw the gate lowering, a silent guardian restoring the boundary. The driveway was mine again, not just in deed, but in spirit. The peace that came with it was absolute.